Ladies and gentlemen, friends, countrymen, lend me your ears. WeatherBrains episode number 582, the pre-show for March 13th, 2017. This is the magical part of the program where we rant, rave, share boring stories, humorous anecdotes, and we occasionally say outrageous things. And who's going to start with something outrageous?
I have an apology to give you, James.
Well, go.
I let a tweet out of the pen tonight too early for tomorrow.
What?
And you retweeted it. So anyway, the SEC basketball thing happened tomorrow, not tonight. I just I didn't update the date.
The way I do the tweeter,
it comes to you tweet it. You should be able to trust your tweet sources.
Quick process. And I saw it from the Alabama Weather blog, and I thought it was a trusted, reliable source, and I just hit the retweet button.
Well, we have been decremented one level on the trust meter. So anyway, sorry about that.
Okay, it happens. It happens.
Yeah, actually, tomorrow is the anniversary, but that's just still, to me, one of the most fascinating stories, how that happened.
So here's my boring personal story. So I was sitting in this room on that night. And you said this was 2008, right?
That's right.
And my phone rang, and it was an iPhone, I guess, 1 or 2. But hey, man, we had some fancy phones back then. And it was Tom Stipe. Tom is a longtime friend, and he produces the University of Alabama Sports Network. And he said, and I had just walked in. We had been to a ballpark practicing hitting. Our son was pretty young at the time. And he said, I think there's some really bad weather going on here in Atlanta. He was at the court side during the basketball game, and he said, nobody's saying anything. We don't know anything. So would you be willing to come on the air with us? And so I said, okay, let me pull up the radar, and my jaw dropped.
Yeah, it's one big thunderstorm.
It was a classic tornado on radar. Yeah. And I'm thinking, Lord have mercy. I said, put me on the air right now. And so I did 15 minutes of wall-to-wall weather on the University of Alabama Sports Network, the basketball network. And that was surreal. And then Joe Dean Jr., who was doing the television.
The Raycom version.
Yeah, he kind of jumped in and said, James Spann is on the Alabama network saying there's a tornado and nobody's telling us anything.
And he's right.
But, you had these, part of the ceiling was kind of coming in, these tiles, and the rafters were shaking up there, and all the scaffolding and everything, and it was horrifying. And
water main broke, and you could see outside the building. It was terrible.
That could have been absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah, you could have had 500 fatalities that night.
Yeah, easily. And so, but I was in this room, and it was just so odd. I punched up the television coverage, and they didn't know what was going on either. I mean, nobody down there. And what that did, it's taken the Southeastern Conference, in my opinion, from worst to first. That started a process that now where they've got a very good plan for all these venues, even baseball and softball, the spring sports.
Speaking of that.
Yes.
I was just hired today for the Southeast Conference baseball tournament.
Woo-hoo. And the blog was just hired to advertise for it, so that's good.
All right.
Wow. That would get a double bill there.
Yes. So James, you pull that post up tomorrow. Well, I guess you can't now because I took it down. But I went back and pulled the radar archive issue from that time of the warning, and it was just phenomenal.
I will anxiously await that post tomorrow. And it's a very interesting story in that, you had the shot that sent the game to overtime. And if not, those people would have been outside walking in the middle of a tornado in downtown Atlanta. It was Alabama and Mississippi State, and just a surreal kind of night. That was crazy. So Brian, how much money those guys paying you?
I can't divulge that information.
Come on, man. This is the pre-show. This is where we wear our heart on our sleeve. We're transparent here. I think he's getting $50,000.
You're nuts. There's the show title. I think he's getting 50,000. I'm going to put that as the show title.
The show title always shows up in the pre-show. The problem is nobody listening to the audio show, which is most people.
And I'm going to pass that on to the SEC folks and see what they say.
But who hires you in that situation? Can you divulge that, Brian? Is it Bruno or is it SEC?
It's actually through Bruno, but I mean, it's for SEC because I'll be working with the Bruno event team and the SEC officials.
You know what started that? I want to say this was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
I was trying to play tennis with my buddy, and we had some thunderstorms, and a tennis match got blown up, and so I kept getting calls from the SEC baseball. I mean, just call after call after call. I said, "Look, guys, just let me come over here, and I'll sit with you." And so I wound up sitting there for like 6 or 7 hours trying to get that last game in and make some decisions. So that I think that's the genesis of your job there, Brian. That you got to have somebody at a tournament
commission,
like
Brian.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was it. So
yeah, and again, they had a Hoover fireman there, and great guy, knows a lot about weather, and he had I think radar scope or some app. But in a situation like that, for a large tournament with lightning and thunderstorms at the time of the year, you just have to have somebody make a decision. So I'd say a great call.
Well, hope I do a good job for them.
But yeah, I think your rates are too low. You tell them next time $50,000. And for me, when I went out there for that Sunday, I got a free meal, and the meal was good. I was happy with that. It worked for me. So man, that tweet storm by
that was
Gary,
amazing.
that was a great story, Rick. Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome.
I have not read that
when
yet.
you get out of the weather service, you can be cranky like that and take people on. I love it.
Well, he was doing that pretty well before he left the weather service. But he was counting down to retirement, so he there was a little bit of freedom there.
But have the check started yet?
And we'll see what people don't understand. You have to have this very bizarre combination of sass and grace to do weather on Twitter. If you're in our position, it is and I had to get sassy today. I had some haters on me today.
Yeah, what was that about? I saw you said that.
Well, it was just some jabroni, and he said, "Gosh, the traffic is just unbelievable today because of the winter storm here." But he just basically said, "You suck," and for some reason,
because of the winter storm. What winter storm? The one up in the Northeast?
I don't know. The forecast was good today. I don't know what brought that on, but for some reason, and sometimes if you're in a raw mood, it just triggers you. And even when you count to 10, you just want to immediately react a little bit. And so I just retweeted the guy and said, "Warning, haters are out today." Here's what he said. If I sucked as bad at my job as you do, I'd get kicked out.
Wow.
It's like,
he probably does.
And then some other guy got in here. He's all little crappy comments about the app and the blog and the guys, just calm down. And again, when you come after me, if you dish it out, you got to be able to take it. That's my position. So we're about to hit television
that guy that brought you up on charges for the radar the other day. Which one is this? You needed to check your radar again because it was a storm in Coleman County, and the storm was actually over in Marion County.
Yeah. I get some weird stuff, and
well, that was weird because I don't know why the guy got the idea that it was so close.
Well, the deal is, I know I know the situation now. He was seeing lightning in Coleman County.
Yeah, I realized that.
The storm was 50 miles away, and he just thought it was in Coleman County, and he just said, "You're an idiot for saying it's 50 miles away because I'm seeing the lightning."
Yeah,
he doesn't know that you can see lightning from a distant storm at night like that. So,
right, I've seen lightning over 100 miles away.
Yeah, that was more ignorance than hate.
Yeah, that was just pure ignorance. But the thing about it is, you won't hear when it's 50 miles. You're not going to hear thunder.
Right.
So,
which means, you know what that means, Brian? It's heat lightning.
Oh yes. I'm going to lighten up some heat here.
Yeah. So, welcome to our television viewers. It is 30 minutes after the hour. This is WeatherBrains. We are in the pre-show. This is episode number 582. We're about to start the actual show here in mere moments. But I like it when our friends on the television side get to join in on the pre-show because for those just watching us on television, maybe for the first time, before we actually start the show, we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. And the little secret is that we do that during the show, too. So
I have a rant.
Whatever happened to the pre-show show?
Yeah, the podcast we talked about. Because, see, this is good. Some of the best stuff we do is on the pre-show, and this never goes out to the world.
Didn't you say some guy approached you about doing a pre-show show?
Yes.
Whatever happened to that?
It was Isaac Piggott, a local guy, and he listens to the pre-show and thinks it's fantastic, and he thinks we should do a podcast called The Pre-Show Show.
Oh, I thought there was some guy that wanted to aggregate a bunch of pre-shows and do a show.
It was kind of the same thing because others do this, and but I don't know. I'll see if I can hit him up because that would be funny. Because
speaking of pre-show, I went back and listened to last week's pre-show. There was a letter from MetLoop that came, or a note that came back.
Not just an email.
Yeah. Did you share that one or not?
No, it was just thanks for letting me be on the show and. Please have me back again sometime.
No, it did not.
Yes, it did. I swear. I'm glad to distribute it.
I'm going to have to see that.
Okay. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you later.
Boy, we talked about that episode a lot here in recent days. That got a lot of play. So I was... I did three conference talks in 2 days, and that subject came up at all three of them. I did two in Chicago and one in San Antonio, and we'll talk about it when the show starts. I don't want to burn the good material here in the pre-show.
You said the pre-show was the best part.
It is, but I just don't want people missing it. So, Bill, did we got a guest coming on, or are we?
Yeah, I emailed. I was a little bit late with the email, though, so they'll probably be joining us anytime now.
Okay, well, let's get this sucker started here. Why not? Let's go with this recorder on here and this one on here, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 582 for March 13th, 2017. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. We've been doing this 11 long years. And here we are tonight. This is James Spann, and we have a few folks out for obvious reasons. Aubrey Urbanowitz is out tonight. And for those that don't know, or maybe you're listening later, weeks or months after this, we have a major nor'easter developing on the Atlantic coast, and that is producing some snow issues in her market, which is Harrisonburg, Virginia. And as you might expect, she's a little busy. See, we all actually have real jobs here, except for Brian. Brian is...
Thank you.
Well, you're retired, and you
I'm
work...
not retired.
Well, you work in television.
Never has.
You work in television.
Part-time. I work consulting.
And you do the consulting
work as many hours a day as you do.
And
you probably do.
You do all kinds of stuff.
And I have a bone to pick with Aubrey.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, what's this, a little snow? She ought to be better than the U.S. Postal Service.
Wow. That's tough, man. I would imagine with the consultant, she's on the air probably constantly. I wonder if anybody's going nonstop with wall-to-wall coverage up in there tonight.
You don't think they want to interrupt programming, do you?
I don't know. Now, I would not want to cut off The Bachelor, which is on our channel tonight. But no, big nor'easter coming up the eastern seaboard. Kevin Selly, you ever cut off The Bachelor for a tornado warning?
Thankfully, no. That show baffles me.
It doesn't. Kevin.
There's a lot of shows on television that baffle me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And all the ones that James gets accused of breaking into, they all baffle me.
I only wish that J.B. Elliott was still here to talk about The Bachelor and
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars and halftime at the Super Bowl. I mean, I miss JB's
Hey, have you seen that new reality show with the naked people?
Oh boy, that's the show title right there. No, what's
well, I was so stunned. We're going through the ads, and all of a sudden, as it's going through, I see this naked guy and this naked girl standing there.
What channels are you watching, Brian?
It's A&E.
The show with the naked people.
Yeah, and that's sort of the title, something like that.
You need to let your Showtime
that's the title.
subscription lapse.
Wow. Boy, I don't know. I worry about Brian sometimes. But Brian, thanks for sharing that. We have Rick Smith, who's the warning coordination meteorologist of the National Weather Service in Norman. It is a busy time of the year, spotter training, everything else. But Rick, I'm glad you're here tonight. We probably have some Weather Service questions we need to ask you about this storm and stuff. So how's it going out there? Nice and quiet, huh?
Pretty good. I can tell you that if I had the direct power to interrupt The Bachelor, I would do it.
Yeah.
I would interrupt, and even if there was nothing to talk about, I would do cut-ins, and I would take whatever heat I got for it. So
Rick, I saw you on a Google Hangout this past week. It was Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And this was involving weather communication and consistency and being uniform. And
National Weather Association.
Yeah, I thought that was very good and I wish they'd do more of these. But that was good.
Not because I was on it, but I thought it was great. I mean, they had a good panel, and they really wanting to do more of that kind of thing. So it was a good topic.
They do one every month, and
they do one every month. That's right.
Really a great program.
Yeah, so you definitely need to be on the lookout for those webinar Wednesdays from the National Weather Association. But yeah, as all of you know, how much we've talked about it on the show here, that is a complex topic. So
yes, it is, and it's a very important topic. But I thought it was excellent. In fact, I plugged that link at these conferences. And let me just say, I met a lot of WeatherBrains fans. That was fun. I was in Chicago this past weekend. I spoke to the local chapter of the Chicago American Meteorological Society, and then I spoke to an advanced severe weather seminar that was hosted by the College of DuPage, which was actually held at Wheaton College, which probably makes no sense, but it was a huge crowd at that thing, and we had a lot of WeatherBrains listeners. So I'm so thankful to all of you for coming up at the end and talking to me. We had a great time, met a lot of friends, old friends that listened to the show, and people that have emailed us in the past, and I just had a great time. And also, which is really weird, I spoke in San Antonio at a conference via Skype from Chicago. And I know we had some WeatherBrains folks there. That was an interesting conference down there. That was with Greg Carbon, and we had Tim Marshall and Dr. Doswell was there, and it was fascinating. We had some great speakers at the event in Chicago as well. But more about that later. Bill Murray, bring in our guests before they hang up on us.
Yeah, James, it's National Weather Podcast Month, and the folks from the Carolina Weather Group, Ice Station Houseman, the Stormfront Freaks Podcast, the Tornado Talk Podcast, Weather Hype, and the Weather Junkies are all involved in this special month of guests and promotion. And I tell you what, I think I'd have to give the Weather Junkies the highest marks for the guests so far. And so we're sharing one of their guest panelists tonight, welcoming Dakota Smith from the Weather Junkies. Dakota, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Incredibly honored to be here. Been listening to you guys.
If I had some hair like this guy, I'd be a good-looking guy.
Yes.
Man, I need to buy a toupee that looks like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for having me. Been listening to you guys forever, and part of the inspiration that I made my own podcast. So thank you.
I think I mistakenly called Dakota a woman some shows back, and now that I see him, I can see that that's not the case.
That's okay. That's okay.
Plus, he just got by with calling us all old.
I know some females with that name, but I apologize for that whenever it was.
It literally happens all the time, so.
But it's good to have you here. Dakota, of course, is a third-year graduate student in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State. I had no idea of that when I booked you for the show tonight. That was quite apropos that we chose you to be our guest panelist tonight, Dakota.
Yeah. I actually had Phil on the show last year and met him up just, a few halls away. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's just perfect. Well, tonight's guest WeatherBrain needs no introduction to our group, a research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science there at Colorado State also, and one of our resident hurricane experts, Dr. Phil Klotzbach. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. How are things in San Francisco?
Things are going well out here. It's sunny and 75 today, but last Sunday we had snow on top of our local summit, which is about 3,800 feet. So it was up in about 4 inches of powder, which is not too shabby for here in the East Bay. We don't get a ton of snow. We had snow down to 1,500 feet, which is impressively low snow levels for the East Bay.
Well, y'all are in a little bit of a lull between storms right now, huh?
Yeah, it looks like it's beautiful all week, and then probably next week getting some more precip. But yeah, it's been a pretty epic winter for us. Lots and lots of snow and lots of rain for me and lots of snow in the mountains. So the drought has been very significantly ameliorated. I think last I checked, we were down to 1% of California was left in severe to exceptional droughts from 70% at the start of a year ago. So very good drought relief for most of California.
Yeah, I guess you have to have at least a token 1% of drought in California because it is California after all.
Well, yeah, and I think the part of California that's left in severe drought is like, I don't know, it's near Death Valley, so it's kind of like I don't really know what happens when Death Valley goes in drought. I mean, you're already in a desert. You're in a very. I mean, if you average 1/10 of an inch of rain and you get 0.05, does that mean you're in drought? I don't know.
Yeah, that would be critical drought. But we're glad you're here with us tonight, Dr. Klotzbach. Thanks for being here. So Dakota, real quick, Rick wanted me to mention the idea that he came up with that we would all be Weather Ready Nation ambassadors. And are you guys taking the challenge?
Absolutely, yeah. We've been meaning to do it for a while now and just haven't gotten to it, but this is a great reason to do it. And it sounds like everyone else is going to do it too. So great idea, Rick.
See what you did, Rick? So Rick, say why that's important.
Well, we are the definition of Weather Ready Nation ambassadors, spreading information about safety and preparedness and trying to educate people about the weather and things they can do beforehand. That's all a Weather Ready Nation ambassador really needs to be. And it'd be really cool if we had all our partner podcasts here in National Weather Podcast Month by the end of the month. WeatherBrains was the first, but we're welcoming more. So, and it doesn't, if you're a weather podcast that's not on this list, you're welcome too. So anyway, I think it's cool. And Dakota, I'm glad to hear you say that. And it was great meeting you in Seattle, by the way.
So Rick, how many podcasts have you been guest panelists on yet so far?
Does this one count?
All right, now, National Weather Podcast members out there, you got Rick Smith standing here volunteering to be a guest panelist, so you need to sign him up as quick as you can. I know Brian Peters did too. Brian Peters. Brian, you ready to be a guest panelist somewhere?
Sure, anytime. I was on the one in the Carolina.
Yeah,
back months ago.
Yeah, I was excited to be on
years
that
ago.
Of course, we had Jen last week from the Storm Freaks Storm Front Freaks, and that was great. Jen's a good friend of the show too. So, but now Dakota, you're deputized here tonight. You are one of us, so we're going to expect you to jump right in like we do. Don't be bashful.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm sure you got about 1,000 questions you could ask. We could just turn this into the Phil and Dakota show here with no problem, probably. But use the chat if you need to, or otherwise just interrupt and jump in because we want you to have a good time tonight. So Phil, give us a report from the AMS conference. Anything big in Seattle?
Let's see, from Seattle. It's been a lot of meetings since then. Trying to think what really jumped out at me. So yeah, we're actually working on some interesting projects. Let's see. Trying to think what has really jumped out the last couple of months. I mean, I think there's some cool stuff coming out of NHC this year, with some of the new storm surge stuff going operational. That'll be really cool. Trying to think what actually came out of AMS. It's been a while since then. It's
Uh-oh.
I figured that
Phil is frozen.
He's in San Francisco. They have like
I thought they had like Google Fiber out there or something.
So
wow.
So Dakota, anything you can add to what Phil was starting to talk about? Any cool hurricane stuff? You're not really as much a hurricane guy, are you?
Yeah, I didn't go to many of the tropical parts of it. I did mostly social science stuff. But I mean, it was a great time. It's great meeting new people. Great, I met Rick out there, met so many different people, and meeting up with old friends, new friends. Yeah, and Seattle's a great place to have it. Actually had pretty decent weather when we were there. I think the sun broke out a few times, which, don't really expect that time of year. And it wasn't too rainy. So
Dakota, what's the focus of most of your research?
So I work with a carbon cycle model, essentially, and I look at West African grasslands or tropical grasslands, any tropical grassland, and the productivity of those grasslands and how they impact the carbon cycle, because we're really, really bad at modeling grasslands. And we're pretty good at forests, but grasslands is the thing that we're trying to work on. And I use satellites to verify our in-house model. Use something called fluorescence, which is just a proxy for productivity, and use soil moisture data that we get from a brand new satellite that was just put up. And
so anything interesting that you're learning that you can share with us?
Well, with most models, our model is wrong. And
that's the show title right there.
Yeah, and so it's been fun to see why it's wrong and how it's wrong, and hopefully I can fix it. And I'm writing my thesis right now, and that's probably going to be the biggest result is fixing our model, making it a little better, and modeling the carbon cycle a little bit better.
So how did you get into weather, Dakota?
Well, I mean, it's the classic story. I grew up in Maryland. East Coast snowstorms really got me, and I'm super jealous of everyone right now back at the East Coast. Mm-hmm. I actually flew out. I was out here last year this time, or in January, sorry. And before the big storm, I bought a ticket and went out there to experience the storm because I knew we were going to get slammed in Maryland. So I got to see that storm, but this storm wasn't quite big enough where I live to warrant a ticket. But super jealous of that. And snowstorms was a thing that hooked me from the get-go.
So Dakota, was the snowstorm in New York City officially the biggest ever at Central Park, or am I remembering?
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not so focused in that area. I'm more of a Maryland, DC guy. But I think I'm pretty sure it was the biggest snowstorm in Central Park.
So were you there in 2003 for the President's Day snowstorm?
Yeah, I was. To me, the biggest, my favorite snowstorm in Maryland was 2010, February 2010. We got back-to-back 20-plus inch storms within 5 days, and there was 50 inches of snow on the ground in Maryland. You expect that somewhere way far north, or like in the Great Lake, right off the Great Lakes lake effect. But in Maryland, just blew my mind, and yeah. And luckily, I was a senior in high school still, so I didn't go to school for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, we had a hotel in Largo, Maryland, and they sent me pictures, and it looked like little baked Alaska sitting in the parking lot, all the cars.
Yeah, it was incredible.
And like a bunch of Mounds bars out in the parking lot.
Yeah, and the December before that, in 2009, we had a 20-inch storm. So we had 3 20-inch storms in the same winter, which is just unprecedented.
Yeah, it busted my snow removal budget for sure that year. But talk about a twin jet structure for a minute, Dakota, and why that's important into this rapid deepening process. I'm just beginning to get a little learned about that at a scary level. So I thought you might share some information on that.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes down to it, it's all about divergence aloft. And when you get a structure like that, the winds are set up in a fashion where you're just getting a tremendous amount of divergence aloft, which is removing mass from the column of air, and that allows the load to deepen. And you'll probably see the term bombogenesis thrown out there this weekend or this week. It's definitely a clickbaity type of thing, but it is a thing. So I actually honestly haven't been paying too much to the upper air. I've been writing a lot and just kind of looking at some of the infrared and radar imagery right now. But yeah, definitely a special setup they have right now. And it looks like it's going to impact a large area. It's not too often where you can get 20 inches all the way from the coast to way upstate New York. And it looks like there's a chance of that happening all the way up to upstate New York. So definitely a special storm, and it'll be really interesting to see where that rain-snow line sets up along the coast.
So do you think Washington, D.C., Baltimore gets kind of screwed in this deal, or are they going to have a big snow?
DC could get screwed. If that's the classic spot to get screwed in a snowstorm like this. When you have that low transfer, it's kind of like a Miller B setup. Is just a name that they give it when you have two lows and it transfers to the coast. I've been screwed so many times by those in Central Maryland, and you want the Miller A where you have just one low that goes all the way up the coast, and it's not. It is a little Miller A heavy because the coastal low is going to be the most dominant part of it, and so that's why DC could get screwed, and some parts of Long Island and the Cape could get screwed as well. But if you don't like snow, then that's good for you, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's a relative term. So,
Yeah.
24 years ago today, we were digging out from the superstorm, which was also, incredible. How would this rate against the superstorm and maybe against the 1888?
I don't think it's gonna come close to the superstorm, just because that laid down so much snow all the way to the Gulf Coast practically. I think they got like an inch close to the Gulf Coast. And I was actually reviewing the NISA scale because we had Dr. Uccellini on our show last week, and I had to geek out with him about snowstorms, and I went back to look at some of the snowstorms, and 93 is I think it's the only, maybe there's one or two Cat 5s. I think that's but it's the highest rated snowstorm on their index, the NISA index. So this could crack the top 10 for snowstorms, but I don't think it'll crack top 3. January 2016 last year, I think, is the 3rd or 4th one. So yeah, but I'll definitely be monitoring that. And they're writing a new book, by the way. They're coming out with a new volume for the 2000 snowstorms. So look out for that.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. James Van, I bet you got some good 1993 superstorm stories to share.
Boring personal stories. No, I think out of that whole time, and the way it worked for me, we were on Red Mountain, which is a ridge overlooking the city here. And we had drifts, and Kevin was with me. And again, it's all on YouTube. If you want to see a really fun look at James Spann and Kevin Selly, and Dan Satterfield, go back to YouTube and search Blizzard of 93. But we had drifts over the cars. We had drifts to the roof of the building, and we had convective snow and wind gusts to almost hurricane force. And we couldn't go anywhere. I mean, I know why people die from heart attacks shoveling snow now. I had no idea before that. But Sunday night after the blizzard, I guess you call me, Bill.
Who called?
A guy named Country Boy Eddie.
So an Alabama legend.
He did a local country music show for years, like 38 years, and he couldn't come in because he was snowed in for the first time in 37 years. He couldn't come to work, and he asked me to host his program the next morning. That was the worst hour of local television ever. We had to play these horrible country music videos, and I had to read his commercials. The first was a product called Rabbit Nuggets. And I thought it was food you feed your
nuggets are.
I thought it was food you feed your little pet rabbit, but no, it was like rabbit meat that people eat. And in the ad message, it said it tastes just like chicken. And then he had a product called Jogging in a Jug, and he said take a swig on the air. To this day, it was just sickening. But on that morning, we started to warm up and we started to dig out, and that's when the process started. But no, that was one for the ages. And again, go to YouTube and look for that stuff with Kevin. In fact, hang on here. Hang on. So here's the famous
hat. Oh, the hat.
This is the famous Blizzard of 93 hat here that Kevin wore. We have preserved it as best we can. And
as best you can. Look at that thing. It looks terrible.
Should be in a vacuum encased glass.
You have so abused that. You look like a cross between Freddy Krueger and Mr. Haney.
Wow. So how do we get down this rat hole? Bill never asked me.
Yeah, because I teased the show today on the blog that we were going to be talking tropical, and of course we spent the entire time talking nor'easters. But we're glad to have Dr. Phil Klotzbach back. Phil.
Yeah, sorry. I experienced the future of awesome, and it was pretty pathetic. Another good Comcast fail there. Sorry about that.
We figured y'all were like on Google Fiber or something all over San Francisco, huh?
No, unfortunately, we have Xfinity, and they claim they fixed some issues I was having last week, but I'm not convinced they did, given what just happened. But I apologize for that, gentlemen. But having grown up in the Northeast, I can obviously excited about the nor'easter as well. My mom and my sister just flew out today. They got a day early. They were supposed to come out and visit me tomorrow, but they came out today because they live in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So I told them to get the heck out early if they could to avoid the impending snowstorm.
Absolutely.
So anything you wanna share about your childhood and snowstorms and blizzards and things like that?
Oh yeah, no, that's really what kind of got me hooked on weather to begin with. I was always interested in hurricanes, but I think really growing up, I was one of those kids that used to wake up first thing in the morning and watch AM weather. Didn't you guys watch AM weather?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Way back in the day at like 5:30 in the morning.
Like a lifeline.
We had those guys on the show.
It
was
wonderful.
awesome. We geeked out when those guys came on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Joan
awesome.
and who was the guy with the little mustache? What was his name that was on there? Dang it, escapes.
I can see his face, but I can't recall his name.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I grew up in Plymouth, so I was always really obsessed with nor'easters. And so like the storm of 93, so we lived in Plymouth, so right on the water. So that one was like 12, 14 inches of snow, and then it changed to rain, and then everything refroze at the end. So we had a lot of those kind of situations where you have that infamous benchmark, which is 40 north, 70 west. And if it goes west of the benchmark, then in Plymouth, you end up getting east southeast winds, and you end up changing to rain. So if it goes pretty much right along the benchmark, that was the money spot for me from Plymouth to get the most snow.
I was thinking about that today. That's the benchmark for Boston, that 40-70 location.
Pretty much, yeah. And I actually did a paper last year on how the MJO, so Mount-Julian Oscillation, tropical convection, impacts snowfall frequency in southern New England.
Yeah, so talk about that for a second. I had that on the list to talk about, Phil.
Well, I figure given what's going on tonight, the tropics are pretty quiet. So, so what we were looking at was it actually was motivated by the winter of 2014-15, which was a very quiet winter until about late January, and then southern New England had just an incredible amount of snow. And I noticed there were some kind of tropical convective signals that there were some tropical convective signals that were kind of looked to be kind of pretty good signals for that particular event. So a guy that I've been working with in Tasmania has a 100+ year long MJO data set. So we looked at his MJO data set combined with daily snowfall as back as I could get it for southern New England stations. And what we found is that when you have the MJO in phase 7, 8, and 1, it tends to be when you get more nor'easter frequency, higher nor'easter frequency, increased chance of heavy snow in southern New England. And basically what happens is once you get, when you get your deep tropical convection anomalies moving into the central Pacific, it tends to kick off like a wave train, which propagates downstream into a big trough over the eastern US. And it actually got mentioned on the Weather Service forecast discussion at the Taunton office a few weeks ago when they had that major snowstorm. It was kind of cool to see them actually mentioning that paper. It's nice to actually see the odds match up with your theory every now and then.
Yeah, that's just awesome. That's really cool. So anything you want to add to that, Dakota, about the MJO and Dr. Klotzbach's research?
I got to be honest, don't know much about MJO stuff. They do a lot of research here, but I don't really dabble in that too much.
So Phil, we always want to know what you think about the hurricane season. I guess you believe we're going into an El Nino at the peak of the hurricane season this year?
I'm not convinced on that fact. I mean, a lot of the models are pretty bullish. The European Center is very bullish on El Nino, although with a very large spread. But if you look at the winds the last few weeks have been kind of easterly, low easterlies in the central tropical Pacific, and it's not particularly conducive for generating El Nino. Those winds are going to have to change, I think, pretty soon if we're going to El Nino. That's going to impact at least the Atlantic hurricane season. So you get a good westerly wind burst, and potentially two if we're going to get an El Nino. The heat content is increasing, but I'm not convinced necessarily we've built up enough to trigger an El Nino. So I think the jury's kind of still out, but certainly if the European model's right, we're going to get I think the ensemble average is somewhere around a 1 degree Celsius warm anomaly. It should put it at a moderate event, which probably would mean a quieter hurricane season. So that's certainly something we're going to be obviously monitoring very closely. Our first seasonal forecast comes out for the Atlantic on Thursday, April the 6th is our first seasonal forecast.
So Phil, was it 94 or 95 when we really kicked into this active phase? And how is that changing now at this point?
Yeah, so we moved into the active era. So 94 was very, very quiet, and then 95 was a very active hurricane season. So there were a lot of changes in the ocean. The North Atlantic got a lot warmer. The far North Atlantic really increased or warmed up a lot. And Dr. Gray was, if you look at the forecast he put out in 95, he really jumped on and said, oh, it's really, really warmed. And so 95, when he put out a forecast for, I think he even just said a little bit above normal, that really turned some heads since we had 4 years in a row that were very quiet. And in general, have been quiet since around 1970. So to forecast a reasonably active season really got people's attention. And then it verified it was even more active, I think, than he predicted it was going to be. But that kind of really triggered stuff off. We've generally been in an active era since 95, but the last few years have been pretty quiet. And especially the peak of the season. So if you add up the tropical cyclone activity in 2013, 14, 15, and 16 in September, it's the quietest 4-year Septembers added together for accumulated cyclone energy, which is kind of an integrated cyclone metric that we've had since 1911 to 14. So that was a long time ago. In 1914, the Boston Braves won the World Series. So that tells you kind of how long it's been since.
Wow. So that's even quieter than seasons like 77 and things like that, huh?
In September, yeah. Septembers have been extraordinarily quiet the last 4 years. And I think, and so we've seen more activity the last few years late. 14, 15. Let's see. So in 2014, we had Faye and Gonzalo, which hit Bermuda. Then 2015, we had Joaquin. And then 2016, certainly everyone remembers Hurricane Matthew, obviously was very intense. And also we had Nicole a little bit later on that generated quite a bit of that ACE. So that's one of the metrics that we use. So we're kind of looking at that to try to see exactly what's going on, why the peak of the season has been so dead the last few years. But we've generally had more cold water, especially in the far North Atlantic, which I think is one of the things that we're looking at is maybe we moved out of this active era for Atlantic hurricanes.
And so anything jump off the page at you about Matthew other than the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely it did a lot of interesting things. I mean, I think one of the things about Matthew that was interesting was the path that it took was very similar to 1979 Hurricane David, very, very similar to that storm. But I mean, we dodged a massive bullet with Matthew. I mean, not that Matthew wasn't bad. It was bad. It killed, I think, 49 people last I saw it for the U.S., besides thousands of people in Haiti. But had that storm tracked 50 to 100 miles further west and it basically brushed, and actually the eye wall may come ashore, the damage would have been 5-10 times worse. Especially if the eye, say, made landfall and say Brevard County gone right up to Florida East Coast, that would have just been a horrible, horrible storm. So while it was certainly very damaging, it was obviously a lot less damaging than it would have been had it been just slightly further west. I mean, that was a very impressive storm. If you look at some of the damage footage from the Bahamas, cars have been overturned by that storm. And that's some impressive winds to overturn a car. So you're talking tornadic kind of winds more than your typical, it wasn't a category 1 or 2 when it hit the Bahamas. It was a legit Cat 3 or 4, depending on which part of the Bahamas. So it was definitely a very impressive storm. Obviously set a lot of longevity records as it went across the Caribbean up into the United States. Set quite a few kind of longevity records, and it was the first Category 5 in the U.S. or first Category 5 in the Atlantic since Felix back in 2007.
So you go back in time and you see, we remember back to 2005, and I can remember getting toward the end of that season and just wondering how many more of these can we take, and then suddenly it was like turning off a spigot for major hurricanes in the United States. Comment on that, and I know our dumb luck or divine providence or whatever it is runs out at some point, but what are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, we survived Matthew breaking that streak by the skin of our teeth. I mean, it was very, very close. I believe the Western Owl did kind of brush Port Canaveral, but obviously the eye never came ashore. So it's been 11 years, which is the longest period on record for major hurricanes without a landfall. And again, major is just based on the wind. The maximum winds have to be 111 miles an hour. So certainly there have been some legitimately strong storms like Hurricane Ike, which did a lot of damage in Texas, just below Category 3 threshold. Obviously, Sandy was a devastating storm, but it was the size of the storm and the surge that it caused and the rain, it wasn't the winds. The winds themselves were not that strong with Sandy. It was the water that was obviously caused the billions upon billions of dollars with Sandy, which is one of the things that Hurricane Center obviously emphasizes with these storms is obviously winds are part of the issue, but you obviously have a lot of, water related damage can often be the big issue more than the winds is the water. So in the case of Sandy, but yeah, 11 years of no major landfall and hurricanes is really remarkable. Given that the last 11 years overall have been about average basin-wide activity, so to have 0 landfalls when you've had that much basin-wide activity is really, it's a remarkably good string of luck. I think obviously there has been luck, a storm like Matthew making landfall by 50, 60 miles, that's just luck. But then we've generally had an area of low pressure along the East Coast has tended to kind of keep the storms out to sea. Basically, storms that they're coming up from east to west across the basin, hit the trough, they tend to move more towards the north and then recurve. But that's obviously an average pattern over 11 years. So it's not like the patterns are every single day, but that pattern has, so to speak, at least loaded the dice a bit.
So maybe the Democrats should have used that in their campaign strategy for this year. They were the first president without a major landfalling hurricane, right? Since
let's see, I tweeted about it. Benjamin Harrison was the last one. That's pretty impressive because we've had some short, guys like Kennedy weren't president for very long, but even they all had major hurricanes. So yeah, to have none, Obama was impressive given, especially that he served 2 full terms. That was impressive. So you had to go back to the good old Benjamin Harrison. I think it was Benjamin Harrison. Maybe it was Garfield. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, one of those presidents, but
yeah, so a long way away.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that you were excited about some of the new Hurricane Center products that are coming out this year, especially those that relate to storm surge. Talk about those for a second.
Well, I think having, one of the things that obviously is a challenge when you're trying to convey hurricane damage potential and everything is you have hurricane watches and warnings, but a lot of the issue with a lot of the death and destruction is from storm surge. So having a special storm surge watches and warnings operation, I think is really going to help because I think storm surges for many of these storms is the real primary threat, and really trying to teach people more and more about storm surge. And a lot of those, the online applications that Hurricane Center has developed are fantastic. You can basically see, instead of showing storm surge, it now shows inundation above ground level. So you can, if you know where you live on a map, you can see how much water the Hurricane Center is saying has a reasonable chance of getting into your house. So then okay, is it 1 foot? Or is it 8 feet? And obviously, if you're getting 8 feet of water in your house, that means you want them to be evacuated. So I think that's a very helpful tool for emergency managers, but also for just curious coastal residents if they're trying to assess the likelihood of evacuation for a specific storm.
So are those maps and surge things based on 10% exceedance or what, Phil?
Yeah, I believe they consider I think what do they call it? The reasonable worst case scenario, which I believe is 10% exceedance.
So really that's a 10% probability that you're going to have that there. And
correct. Yeah. So there's a 10% chance you could have more water than that in your house.
And people need to understand that because we have lots of people that are saying, "Oh, I didn't get 8 feet of water in my house," and it's really a worst case scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like a 1 in 100 chance, but it's like a 1 in 10. So it's something that could happen. It might not be the highest case scenario, but it's something that has a legitimate chance of happening. It's not saying a 1 in 100 chance. So these products are very helpful. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's the emergency managers that make the final decision, and they'll tell you whether you need to shelter in place or evacuate. Because obviously, the fewer people, you want to have people evacuate that need to evacuate, but you don't want shadow evacuations. You don't want people leaving that don't need to leave. So that's obviously one of the big things with these hurricanes when they come ashore is you obviously want people that are on the beach, that are in harm's way, that need to get out. But for those that aren't in immediate harm's way, their houses that can survive the storm, they don't need to evacuate. You want them sheltering in place.
So it seemed to me that the Florida emergency managers and the state overall did a good job with Matthew from what I could see.
Yeah, I think, again, I know there were some, because my brother lives on the coast in East Florida, and I know there were some people that were very upset that they had to evacuate or, complain about boarding up their windows. But again, yes, you didn't get your house destroyed, but what would you rather have happen? Would you rather have, evacuate and come back and find your house demolished? Again, at the end of the day, be thankful that the storm stayed 50 miles or 75 miles offshore. It was just too close to call. And that's the challenge with the storm like Matthew is if you have a storm that's traveling parallel to a coastline, obviously very slight changes in the angle of the approach can cause huge impact differences. I mean, if Matthew had stayed, a track 10 degrees further east, then Florida would have been almost completely fine. Because I had friends living in Miami, and they said they had almost no wind. It was just everybody was kind of waiting for the hurricane, and nothing happened. And they knew it was kind of borderline, but you have to take precautions because the hurricane forecasting is not a perfect science.
So Phil, what was it like to work with Dr. Gray all those years?
Yeah, well, Dr. Gray was a tremendous guy, and actually, literally, I will be resubmitting tomorrow the corrected version of a paper for the Bulletin and the AMS on Dr. Gray. So myself and a few of Dr. Gray's other PhD students were writing a paper, and so hopefully, I think we answered all the reviewers' issues. So hopefully, this should maybe be coming out in August, September timeframe. So it'll be it's actually a pretty lengthy piece on Dr. Gray and his legacy. I mean, he did a tremendous amount. I mean, besides the seasonal forecast, which is kind of what he's best known for, he did a lot with tropical cyclone genesis. So he's the first guy who basically said, okay, here's why storms form where they do around the globe. Here's kind of necessary conditions for tropical cyclones to form. Because even things like vertical shear, which we all talk about now, and we know shear is detrimental for storms, back in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't necessarily known that that was the case. So his paper in 68 that kind of really hit that point home was really one of the first ones to really kind of hammer the point home about shear being detrimental. And then he also did a lot with tropical cyclone motion. So basically what the steering level is for tropical cyclones and the beta effect and all that stuff. And then he did tropical cyclone structure. He got all the aircraft data and kind of showed kind of the structure of tropical cyclones and super gradient flows and all that good stuff. And then he did just tropical convection. He's one of the first guys who documented when tropical cyclones. Basically, when you have convection in the tropics or tropical oceans, that it maximizes in the mornings. And he kind of documented that and discussed how it was a response to radiational cooling and just a huge footprint on the field. There's probably not a lot of scientists that you want to write a paper in a full-length paper in the Bulletin when they pass away, but I figured Dr. Gray and maybe a Bob and Joanne Simpson are the kind of people that those kind of papers are warranted. Did
you get to spend any time with the Simpsons, Phil?
I did not very much. I met both of them very briefly, but no, unfortunately, I hadn't spent too much time. So my knowledge of the Simpsons was just via stories that Dr. Gray told me.
So Phil, I know you studied the effects of climate change on tropical cyclone structure and frequency and intensity. Talk a little bit about that for a minute. Yeah, so we've done a lot of looking from an observational perspective. And so from an observational perspective, if you look at tropical cyclone data, so we have reasonably good data going back to the mid-1980s. And if you look since the mid-1980s globally, so the Atlantic can go back a lot further, but for global data, prior to the mid-80s, the data gets pretty dodgy. You just aren't directly overlooking satellites, which is the way that we observe hurricanes in every basin other than the Atlantic. So if you look since 85, there's no statistically significant trends, and you wouldn't necessarily expect to see any trends since most of the models say storms may get slightly less frequent and they may be a little bit stronger, but if you're talking a couple miles an hour and we only measure them within maybe 10 miles an hour with accuracy, and you have El Nino and La Nina, which have huge impacts on global storm activity, you're hard-pressed to detect a signal in 30, 35 years of data. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see anything. So from an observational perspective globally, there's been no trend in really anything within the data limits. But that's not to say that storms won't necessarily get stronger in the future. But I think really the big concern that I would say we have is that regardless of the storms, the intensities don't change at all. If you have any sort of increase in sea level, say even a foot of sea level rise, in certain areas that can mean a lot more inundation. So I think that's really where the concern comes in, is if you have, say, a foot of sea level rise in a city like Miami, that could potentially mean a lot more city blocks inundated for the same level of storm surge, even if the storm isn't any stronger. I mean, certainly if you go back to like a year like 1926 and look at the Great Miami Hurricane, something like that coming ashore today, even if it was the exact same intensity, no climate change impacts, would be a huge, storm for South Florida. And that's just one of the storms in our history books. I mean, we know that storm came, we know what it did then, but obviously like 8 people lived in Miami in 1926, so it didn't cause the impacts that a storm like that would cause today, when you obviously have a very large population living in obviously a hurricane-prone area. So when you think of hurricanes, you don't think of Colorado. So how did Colorado State get to be so important, or how did Dr. Gray end up landing there?
Yeah, so he worked with Herbert Real, who was a really famous hurricane scientist in the 50s, in the University of Chicago, which Chicago still is really nowhere near hurricanes. If you like lake effect snow, Chicago's not so bad, but really not good for hurricanes. But what happened is Herbert Real was approached to start the atmospheric science department at Colorado State. And so he said yes. And then Dr. Gray was finishing off his PhD. And when we were cleaning out Dr. Gray's desk after he passed away, we actually found the original signed letter from Herbert Real offering Dr. Gray the job at CSU. So he had saved that letter for 55 years. So we had the original letter and we scanned it in and everything for posterity. So, but yeah, so he got offered the position, and so he stayed in 61. He came in 62, I believe it was. And I think he formally got his PhD from the University of Chicago in 64. He was just finishing off some stuff. And then I think he became a full professor in maybe 67, I want to say, is when he became a full professor at CSU. And he was there till, he used to always ask him, how do you like Fort Collins? Do you like Colorado State? And he always said, I'm there in a trial period. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay. But obviously, he loved Fort Collins. He was a big CSU fan. And obviously we still miss him greatly. And, writing this paper and everything, I think it just really, working with his other students and everything just really kind of hit home even more than, obviously I knew him very well and knew a lot of what he did, but I think going back and looking at just the sheer magnitude of the impact that he had on the field is really, really remarkable. And the next AMS tropical meeting, which will be next April, they're going to have a special session on Dr. Gray, which would be really cool. So basically, I think it'll be papers kind of related to his various research topics that were near and dear to his heart.
So all of the seasonal forecasting, everything will go on just like you were still there, huh?
Correct. Yes, I will continue to produce the seasonal forecast as long as I can. So working on that, and then a variety of other fun tropical related projects that will hopefully keep going for the foreseeable future.
So now, how do you like San Francisco, and how did you land there, Phil?
So I landed in San Francisco because my wife works for Cliff Bar. I should have brought a Cliff Bar in, but
no, those
probably have had some of those, working evenings or whatever. And so my wife got a job offer there. So we said, sure, let's move to the Bay Area. So while I was working for Dr. Gray at the time, I've been doing a lot of research, kind of more on my own, but with other people all around the world. So it worked out reasonably well to go out there. And so now I actually work with Michael Bell at Colorado State. He's a new professor that they hired about the same time that Dr. Gray passed away. And it was actually really cool because I knew like a couple days before he died that they were going to hire Michael, and Dr. Gray was very excited that they were bringing him on. So he's my new the new guy that I'm working with, and I believe over the next few months we're going to start bringing him into the world of seasonal forecasting. So you may see another name on the seasonal forecast coming shortly.
So Phil, I know you big outdoors guy. You hiked the Appalachian Trail. How much of it before?
I did the whole thing
Really?
in the summer of 2002.
Wow.
I had to get off to do the seasonal forecast, but I still managed to get done during the summer.
That is just an amazing process to me that you would do that. Have you ever thought about the Pacific Coast Trail? Are you going to do that one day?
I don't know. I one thing I learned is spending 4 months in the woods is I don't think I want to spend another 4 months in the woods. I love in the mountains, but I'm an old man now. I don't know if I can spend another 4 months sleeping in the woods. I'm good for a few nights here and there, but I'm happier to get home. It was something I just had to do. It was kind of a bug in me that I had since I was a little kid. I'm glad I got the opportunity. I'm glad Dr. Gray said, just finish your master's degree by April so you can start. So I had to rush finishing and then headed out. And my dad dropped me off in Georgia and picked me up in Maine. So it was a good exploration of the east coast of the U.S.
So did you mail yourself some boxes along the way?
Yeah, so my parents were my support crew, so I had kind of a checklist of, here's what I would like you to send me, and so they would send it, and they would send me other random stuff, because the thing is, the towns you go through are often fairly small, and if a bunch of thru hikers have been right in front of you, all it could be like 2 cans of sardines or something, so you want to make sure you have your own kind of food. So I ate a lot of Pop-Tarts, a lot of M&Ms, had a lot of cavities when I was done. So, I tried to cut back on the sugar since then because, I had like 5 cavities when I got off the Appalachian Trail. But that's what happens when you eat 40 pounds of M&Ms in one summer.
There you go. So Dakota, did the outdoor life in Colorado have a lot to do with your decision to locate there?
It was mainly my advisor, Scott Denning, who brought me out here. But I absolutely love the outdoor scene out here. And Phil, I noticed that you've climbed all the 14ers. I'm doing a few of them this summer. Any advice for that? Besides, watch out for storms.
yeah, go early. But I don't think I need to tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put it this way. So on Long's Peak, so if you have convection at night, if you're starting your hike before sunrise and you see lightning, don't start. I learned that lesson.
Jeez,
There's nocturnal convection. That's a bad sign for climbing a mountain. So yeah, a bunch of us from CSU almost got struck by lightning in 2001.
Oh my goodness!
You can see the headline.
That would be the headline. Yeah.
Scientists struck by lightning.
that would be terribly ironic or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm trying to think. My favorite one is there any particular range you're looking to head to?
We're mainly sticking like an hour, 2-hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mount Elbert in the fall is really, really nice.
Okay, that's on our list. So.
Yeah, in the fall, because you hike up through the aspen groves, it's really, really pretty. That's one of my favorites to do in the fall. I mean, Long's Peak's classic. If you go during the week, you don't really go on the weekend. It's too many people. It's a conga line up to the summit. There's some cool back ways up some of these 14ers, so you won't get quite the crowds. I'll be back in April, so maybe we can talk then and discuss some. I found some alternative routes up trails that aren't necessarily harder, but just a lot fewer people.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Colorado has a number of 14,000-foot peaks that people try to hike every year, and I'm doing it because it's the Colorado thing to do. But they are crowded. I mean, geez Louise, you could see hundreds of people on some of the most popular hikes in the middle of nowhere, essentially. So.
Yeah. It can be pretty nuts up there. I know. One time in the fall, my wife and I climbed Hope, which is just like 13,992 feet or something. And we were the only ones on the top. And you look across at Elbert, you could see like 80 people on the summit. Wow. Just because it was 20 feet shorter than a 14er or something. No one was interested. So yeah, it's kind of a funny phenomenon, but there's, depending on the list, 54, 55, 56 14ers. So it's kind of the Colorado mountaineering thing to do. And it's definitely even gotten more popular in the last decade since when I did it.
Yeah.
So any other Colorado travel advice for vacationers coming out there this summer that would get them off the beaten path?
Trying to think where the best place. If you're going in the summer, Crested Butte, that area around Crested Butte has some really incredible wildflowers. It can be pretty popular in the summer, but there are definitely, if you're willing to hike more than a couple miles, you can get some really cool basins that have some pretty incredible wildflower scenes. The other place to go if you don't want to do a crazy long hike but get amazing wildflowers is go up to Eccles Pass. It's right off Interstate 70. It's about a 4-mile hike up, and it's just, for about 2 weeks out of the year, it's just carpeted. It's incredible. So I definitely recommend that if you get the chance. And the Maroon Bells area has some amazing wildflowers. You definitely won't be by yourself there, but there's some pretty cool wildflower fields up in that general vicinity as well. So I'm always kind of on the quest. And if you're in Southwest Colorado, there's an Engineer Mountain, which has not many people and has incredible wildflowers, at least in the last year when I went up there. So those are a few kind of nuggets of where I like to go to catch the Colorado scenery in its peak, which usually for flowers is late July, early August, and that's my wife Chris is really big on wildflowers, so we're usually involved hunting for flowers wherever we go on our backpacking or hiking adventures.
Hey Phil, let me ask you a nosy personal question. So I would like for you to grade the performance of the National Hurricane Center. A, B, C, D, F. Which one?
What?
just because I want to
give a grade.
Yeah, pick a grade on their overall operation.
I mean, I would say A or A minus. I mean, I think they do an excellent job. I mean, they do I'm good friends with a lot of the forecasters there. I mean, there's a lot of Bill Gray students there, so I've got there's a lot of Bill Gray at Colorado, or there's a lot of Bill Gray at the National Hurricane Center. So you have Eric Blake and Chris Lancey and Todd Kimberlane were all Bill Gray students, and then you have Dan Mundell, who's in the Taft Bean. I think there's one other guy too. So there's a lot of Bill Gray floating about it down at the Hurricane Center. But I think they do an excellent job. I mean, obviously, I think really last year the last couple years, the key points that they put out when there's a storm impending, just basically taking all the science and just kind of knuckling it down into specific issues has really been good. To kind of say, like, here's the key points from this discussion. Here's what you need to know as an individual on the street. One thing I would love for them to do. And I know they do it on their Twitter feed, but they don't do it with their thing. Is they need to start talking more about the invest numbers, because I think that gets a little bit confusing. You have these storms like, what was it last year? That the one that eventually became Hermine. That I forget the number now.
99L.
Yeah, infamous 99L was out there for like 2 weeks. I was like, for the love, is this thing actually going to form or not? It was always getting hashtagged as 99L, but the hurricanes, they would just refer to it as, this particular wave. And they would talk about it on their Twitter feed as 99L because everyone else was, but it would be nice to have the actual, like, in the kind of tropical cyclone development discussions referring to those invest numbers. I think that'll help clear up a little bit of confusion. Because again, everyone in this day and age, everybody has access to the models. Anyone can look up all this information, and it's nice to kind of see when the Hurricane Center is talking about it, which investor you're talking about, especially because at the peak of the season you could have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 invests at the same time. It's nice to kind of know which is which.
In the severe weather business. Yeah, go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, all in all, I think the Hurricane Center does a great job. They have a tough job. I'm glad the seasonal forecast is it's challenging, but again, it's a lot different when you're talking storms and making landfall and everything. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of life and property, and if you forecast and it doesn't make landfall and you say it's going to, I mean, there's huge kind of repercussions to that. So I think they do an excellent job, conveying the information.
For those of us inland here, we're starting to have some problems with proprietary warnings. Entities, private sector firms issuing their own tornado warnings that conflict with those warnings issued by the National Weather Service. Do you foresee that being a problem with hurricane warnings and watches at any point in the future?
I haven't seen it yet. I mean, I think that would certainly be a challenge. I mean, again, one of the things we always try to emphasize with any messaging is, like, if I'm talking to a reporter and there's a hurricane coming, I will always say, like, because I'm happy to talk with you and I'll try to put the storm in like a historical perspective and compare it with other storms. But you always want you to give a forecast, and I'm never going to say, I'm not going to try to issue a forecast other than I'll tell you exactly what the Hurricane Center is going to tell you. I'm not going to say anything else, because I think it is important when you have something like a hurricane that you really do want that message. I mean, you can have nice visualizations of the models and have that kind of stuff, but I think that would obviously be a concern if you did have, a private weather company saying there's a hurricane watch for this area and the Hurricane Center hasn't done anything yet. That could cause a lot of confusion. So I think I'm hoping now, hopefully it won't come to that. I'm not as familiar with so you say there's some private weather companies now doing tornado watches and warnings?
Yes, and warnings. And that through social science studies, we can prove that introduces confusion, and confusion can lead to inaction, and inaction can lead to somebody dying. And I hope it doesn't happen in the tropical business, but it sure is happening in our business here.
Yeah, that seems like that's a really bad. That seems like that's a really bad thing to have tornado warnings being issued by someone other than the Weather Service, because if you hear a tornado warning, I would respond the same weather, from wherever it's coming. And if you're getting mixed signals, that can be really, really confusing.
And I do know, and you obviously got, 15-year-old kids in their basement with Facebook pages that are doing these outrageous, Category 5 hurricane to strike in 384 hours. And they pull, some GFS deterministic data. But people will share that, thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. I mean, I think really, really one of the reasons why I try to do what I do, and as a lot of other people do similar stuff, is you try to kind of have voices of reason, that kind of convey that, a 15-day forecast from, because a lot, a person on the street's not going to realize that a 15-day forecast from the GFS is completely worthless. I mean, they just see a highly sophisticated model says this is going to happen. But obviously, if you looked at the 15-day GFS forecast for tropical cyclone formation, there's usually a nasty storm somewhere in the middle of the season, and obviously those very, very, very rarely verify. So I think it's important to kind of, I will occasionally put out model projections or whatever, but you always are. I wouldn't probably post anything beyond about 4 or 5 days on my Twitter feed or anything, because beyond that, I just don't really think we have really the ability to forecast. But I think, again, in the end of the kind of the cat's out of the bag, and that anyone who wants to look at a model can look at a model. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to go and go to a website and look at model output. I think it's just a matter of trying to explain what they're looking at, and especially people look at. I've seen meteorologists post stuff like the shallow BAM runs, the beta advection model runs, which is just when you have a deep tropical cyclone, that's probably not where the storm's going to go. So you have to be kind of maybe be a little more careful if you plot model output and you're showing it to your viewers, that you actually show models that have reasonable skill, not just every single model that's run, because some of that's just early guidance to hurricane center uses on maybe a wave or a weak tropical storm, not something they're going to be using on a full-fledged hurricane.
And by the way, Kevin posts that limited barotropic data on his page, right, Kevin? The L-bar. He can't talk. And the Clipper, and what else does he post? Now, that's a joke. He doesn't do that. So tell me about GOES 16, Phil. How will that help the hurricane forecasters?
Yeah, I mean, I think any more high resolution data that we can get, obviously you're going to be able to see better, more the internal structure of the storm. You're going to be able to have improve rapid scan, just higher resolution, everything. And if you looked at the Himawari satellite data out of Japan, you get similar, really high quality. It's going to be very similar to that type of resolution. So you're going to see things basically at higher resolution to be able to see and be able to observe the structure of the tropical cyclones better in real time. Improved like cloud track winds and things like that as well, which is obviously very useful. So I mean, I think it's been another valuable tool to have. I mean, obviously higher resolution data is going to certainly make things better. So hopefully it'll I think it'll especially improve like the nowcasting type of stuff when you're actually looking at a tropical cyclone in real time to kind of see the internal dynamics of the storm.
Yeah, I think the temporal resolution is just amazing, that the frequency of the data we'll get from this thing. So we just can't wait. So one more question, Phil, and we got to take a break. Let's say that I am an emergency manager in Mobile, Alabama, or Panama City Beach, Florida, or Corpus Christi, Texas, and you issue your seasonal outlook. What should I do with that information?
Yeah, well, that's a question we get asked a lot. And I think really what I always tell people is we put it out because we have some skill and people want to know. There's always a question, how active do you think the Atlantic hurricane season is going to be? And so we do it as a scientific exercise, and it's an informational tool, but it's not a preparedness tool. Like if you live along the coast, you need to be prepared every year for hurricane season, because it just takes that one storm to make it an active season for you, and you can have an incredibly active hurricane season and have no landfalls near you, and for you it's a quiet season, even if another state is hit 3 or 4 times. Whereas you can have another season like a 92, where I think I posted this a couple weeks ago on Twitter. Dutch Gray had a fantastic forecast that year, one major hurricane, and it was Andrew. So I mean, it was a great forecast. It was a perfect seasonal forecast, but obviously, if you lived in my South Miami-Dade County, it was not a quiet hurricane season for you. So I think that's one of the reasons is that we do it because we can, and it's an informational tool. People are curious, they want to know, and we can give you some skill at that. But in terms of what should a coastal resident do with it, other than just as information, really nothing. I mean, it's not supposed to be something that, the forecast is active, so I need to prepare. You just need to be prepared the same every year, regardless of any seasonal outlooks, because we can't tell you when or where the storms are going to go. Unfortunately, I don't think that's really ever going to be possible, 6 months in advance.
And one more, the Weather Service, NOAA, they got into the seasonal prediction game, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Did that anger you when that happened, or did you welcome this new seasonal outlook from NOAA?
Well, so NOAA, I believe, started in 1998. So it was a little bit before I got to CSU.
Oh, that's a long time then. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so they've been in it for a while, and I know part of the motivation for them, I think, was the 97 El Nino. The seasonal forecast from CSU wasn't good that year. But I mean, honestly, the NOAA forecast and our forecasts, generally, I mean, you have several former Bill Gray project members on the NOAA forecast. So in general, if you look at their forecast versus ours, they're not a ton different. You're not going to see them forecast a hyperactive season and us forecast one hurricane or something like that. So in general, but obviously, I like all the NOAA forecasters, so I don't think. I mean, it's obviously competition that you want to do better, but in terms of, I again, I wasn't there in '98. I'm not really sure, if there was if Dr. Gray really had any resentment. I mean, I think in general he always kind of was of the opinion that imitation is the purest form of flattery or whatever. So I think he wasn't really too really care that much about it. But I think one thing that we have done now is I developed a website with a group from Barcelona, and we have all of the groups doing seasonal forecasts. I think there's about 17 or 18 groups that do the seasonal forecast for the Atlantic now, all displayed on one website. So you can look and see kind of what the spread is amongst all the different groups. So you have government agencies like NOAA, and you have groups like our group at Colorado State. There's other universities. You have some few private companies that are contributing. So you can kind of see kind of the uncertainty and also just kind of the suite of forecasts. And then on the website, besides the suite of forecasts, you can individual links to the forecast. So you can kind of see what each group is using, which kind of tools they're using to come up with those predictions.
Awesome. Well, let's take a quick break here. We've got Professor Peters and WeatherBrains 101. We've got Tony Rice in the Astronomy Report. We'll come back with the Weather Roundup. We've got Picks of the Week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
If you are a regular to this podcast, you probably qualify as a weather nerd. And I'm using that term fondly and not in any kind of derogatory way. So you've probably been hearing lots of traffic about the nor'easter that is expected tonight and Tuesday to affect the northeastern portion of the U.S. from the mid-Atlantic states into New England. So just what is a nor'easter? Well, the term nor'easter, meaning northeaster, refers to a large-scale low-pressure system or cyclone. While the term can be applied anywhere that you experience a northeasterly flow, the term applies mainly to cyclones affecting New England. The name originates because of the strong wind that generally blows from the northeast as a strong cyclone moves just offshore from the New England states. The counterclockwise flow around the low-pressure center generates these strong northeasterly winds over a fairly broad area. Formation of these storms typically takes place just offshore, typically about 100 miles or so, in the area between North Carolina and Massachusetts. But formation of these storms can take place as far south as the Gulf of Mexico, just as long as the low-pressure center remains offshore in order to produce the strong northeasterly wind over New England. In addition to the strong wind, these storms are typically accompanied by very heavy rain or snow and can produce severe coastal flooding, coastal erosion, wind approaching hurricane force, and blizzard conditions. In fact, a blizzard watch was in effect for a serious chunk of the coastline from New York City to Boston on Sunday, March the 12th. The term nor'easter has a very long history, with its origin having been traced back to the late 1500s and early 1600s, though there appears to be a good deal of debate on this topic. Nor'easters develop in part to the sharp contrast in the warm Gulf Stream ocean current coming up from the tropical Atlantic and the cold air masses riding down from Canada. When the very cold and dry air rushes southward and meets the warm air over the Gulf Stream current, that air often near 70 degrees Fahrenheit, even in midwinter, an intense low-pressure system develops. Aloft, the strong wind of the jet stream removes and replaces rising air from the Atlantic more rapidly than the Atlantic air is replaced at lower levels. Together with the help of the Coriolis force, a strong storm can develop. Model projections on Sunday, March the 12th, placed the lowest pressure of this storm at 986 millibars as the storm center was passing offshore from the coast of Maine. Another interesting aspect of the observation of our atmosphere. If you have a question about the weather, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
The recent death of Bill Paxton got many of us thinking about movies that inspire the next generation of scientists. Those that get the science right are particularly worthy of praise. Today, though, entertainment comes not just on the big screen, but also comes in the little screens in the form of video games. My 15-year-old son, an aspiring meteorologist himself, came to me this evening with a did you know that had him researching a form of lightning that had just cost him a life in his newly purchased video game. I'll let him tell the story.
Earlier today, I was playing the new adventure game, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. At one point in the game, during a sandstorm, I managed to get struck by lightning. I wondered if this was just weird game design or if this was a naturally occurring phenomenon. In moderately dense sandstorms, the charges that get passed throughout the storm can build up intensely, leading to lightning. While this differs to normal lightning, it is completely natural. Points to Nintendo for doing their research.
Elsewhere in the sky, look for the Moon, Jupiter, and the bright star Spica to form a triangle rising after 10 p.m. in the eastern sky on Tuesday, March 14th. Venus and Mercury will be within 10 degrees of each other on Thursday after sunset, but they may be a little tough to see, though. They'll be very low on the western horizon. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Again, we're doing the show on March the 13th, and we are on the verge of a big nor'easter up the eastern seaboard, and it looks like 1 to 2 feet of snow, winds of 50 to 60 miles an hour, coastal flooding, beach erosion. Sounds like a ton of fun. Brian, you're a Northeast United States guy. They
Absolutely.
love it, don't
You'd think it was a hurricane.
I want to hear Dakota geek out some more on the nor'easter. Dakota.
Yeah, come on, Dakota, geek it, man. Geek it. Talk to us.
Radar's filling in right now for Maryland. I'm always looking to where my house is, and I really, really wish I was there right now. They're already seeing some, I think, moderate snow in central Maryland, and it's just going to get worse from there overnight. But the thing that we're really got to watch is the rain-snow line, and then where we're going to get sleet and freezing rain. I'm a little worried that some places around BC could get inches of sleet. And that's never good. I remember it was a Valentine's Day storm. I forget which year it was, but there was I think I had 5 inches of sleet at my house, and the plows just couldn't handle it because it was so heavy. So so that'll be interesting. And then everyone talks about New York City, so we'll see if they get in some of the mixed precipitation as well. It might cut down some of their totals.
And again, explain, Dakota, that rain snow line, that's hard. I've known people that they've worked in D.C. or Philly or Boston for, 20, 30 years. It's still not easy trying to figure out where that thing's going to wind up.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on where the low tracks, whether it's a little bit east or a little bit west. And you can get a tight gradient where within, 30, 40 miles, you have 20 inches, and then the 30 miles east, you have a few inches with some sleet and freezing rain. And it's going to be really tough, honestly. I don't even think that anyone really knows exactly where it's going to set up right now.
This one's even peskier. Because I remember from my days in Richmond, you'd see the upper low coming out of the mountains, and then it would jump down to the coast. But there's really 2 of them now, and you can see that upper low on the radar south of Wilmington, and the surface pressure's dropping on the outer banks, and so it's going to be really squirrely.
Yeah. When you have 2 lows and they have to transfer over to the coast, that's really when you're watching it. I was a little worried that Central Maryland was going to get kind of screwed over here, but it looks like they're already seeing snow and the radar's filling in. So yeah, not much else to say. They're going to have to monitor it. A lot of nowcasting for the storm. Especially for emergency management.
The other tricky part there was the placement of the cold high, because that air would come oozing down the east side of the mountains, and that was always a difficult call too.
Yeah, and one thing that I was going to mention is that a lot of school systems are already closed, including Penn State University, which hasn't closed for snow in over a decade. Wow. And some of the recent runs of the short-term model, the HER, is showing a little less snow than they're expecting. So it'll be interesting to see if they made the call too early or not early enough in some cases. I know Boston, New York, Philly, they're all canceled for tomorrow.
The one thing I guarantee is going to bring out the haters, the trolls, haters, know-it-alls, Monday morning quarterbacks, because inevitably, every time we have one of these, you're going to get some people that don't get what was forecast. And that's just the way it is. It happens every time. And it just, I don't know why people get so stinking mad. You know, if you were forecast to get 15 inches of snow and you wind up with 4, who would be mad about that? I mean, you should be thankful. I don't understand it. And they come, just brutally attack weather people. So we'll be looking for the trolls, but it's going to be a very interesting day tomorrow up the eastern seaboard. So, Rick, things are kind of calmer where you are, huh, in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I'm glad they are. I don't, not easy in Oklahoma or Birmingham either. So, but certainly there's a lot of extra challenges there on the East Coast. But yeah, you're right. The haters are going to be there, and it's going to be a bust somewhere. Somebody's going to, whether the perception is a bust or whether it's an actual bust. I mean, there's going to be a tight gradient somewhere in that snow line. So I was looking at some of the new experimental stuff the Weather Service is putting out. They've got this. They put out 3 graphics now. Some of the offices where it says you're going to get at least this much. You could get on the other extreme this much, but here's the most likely. So JFK, the last time I looked, could be 1 to 21 inches of snow. Snow. I mean, that forecast on a graphic and stick it out there and see how many haters come at you. But no, our weather's quiet here. We got another frost or a freeze for parts of our area tonight, which is the trees and everything are freaking out because it's already been in the 80s. But seems like that happens every year.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. I think it was the Weather Service in New York City. In fact, I'll do a quick screen share, and this is the graphic that Rick is talking about, and I like it. And one of the things we all struggle with is communicating uncertainty, and there's been all kind of talk about this over the goodness for years and years and years. So let me see if I can pull this up. Often I have learned prior to storms like this, the web up there can be a little slow, and I don't see the graphics popping up on their website, but it's got at least this much, the most likely snowfall, and potential for this much. So, Rick, what are your thoughts on those 3 categories? Oh, there we go. They just popped in here. So you've got at least this much, the most likely snow, and then potential for this much. Do you think this will go more widespread across the Weather Service?
I think there's a good chance. I mean, it's being experimented with, and there's a separate experiment going on with a different type of way to quantify this winter storm severity index. But, I like this. This is how we communicate things very often when we're doing briefings for emergency management, public safety officials, some of the decision makers. I can see some of the public really not understanding this, just saying, well, you're saying it could be anywhere from 1 to 24 inches. I could do that. But I think this is realistic. I think there is kind of a lower bound of, well, at least this much. It could be as bad as this, but here's what we're forecasting in the middle somewhere. So,
yeah. You bring up a good point, though, Rick. Is defining what is successful in changing this message, because you're never going to make everybody happy. But at what point do you say, well, this is right? What percentage of the people have to stop yelling for it to be right? That's even more difficult than coming up with the presentation, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And, there's still going to have to be a forecast somewhere that says 6 inches for New York City or JFK or whatever. But I think as far as conveying uncertainty and conveying the range of possibilities, this is one way to do it. And, I think they're collecting a lot of feedback, and this will give them another opportunity to collect feedback and see what people think about it.
I'm giggling here. I posted on my Facebook page a map of snow totals from the NDFD, the National Digital Data Forecast Base, National Digital Forecast Database. That's it. And it's for the Northeast United States. And the first question is, what about Lincoln? That would be Lincoln, Alabama. And this goes back to the problem of people not being able to read maps and understand geography. Geography literacy is a big problem, and we'll tackle that subject on another show. Dakota, how's the weather out in Colorado?
Oh, it's great. It was a little cooler today, but the rest of the week it's upper 60s, lower 70s, and sunny. When you get a big snowstorm on the East Coast, normally you got a nice ridge out here providing beautiful hike weather.
Awesome. And real quick, tell us about your show. When do you produce it? How often? And How do you like it?
So we followed your model of every week. I think that's the way to go. And so we do it every week, Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We do a live show, but then we also put it on iTunes and pretty much any podcast hosting site. And we have guests on. It's myself and Tyler Jankowski. He's a on-air meteorologist in upstate New York right now, and we're very different. Different interests when it comes to weather, and different kind of ideology when it comes to weather and some things. So it's a lot of fun. Our back and forth is interesting sometimes because we disagree sometimes, and we'd like to have on great guests. Last week we had on Dr. Louis Uccellini. Then we had Dr. John Neese on, and then this week we're having on all the weather podcasts, or I think 4 of them. We're going to have Bill on, and then we're going to have someone on from Stormfront Freaks and Carolina Weather Groups. It's going to kind of be like a collision of all the weather podcasts. So it should be a lot of fun.
Who plays the accelerant on that show?
And the big question is, do you have a chemtrails jingle?
You know, we need to step up our sound effect game. I really like your guys' sound effects. So.
Oh yeah. All right.
I bet they're going crazy in the chemtrails group with the BAMs this last month with all the seeding and testing of
oh boy, they were out in full force the other day. But again, we'll hold that for another day. Listen, I'm the top of the newscast, so I got to go. We'll do picks of the week here, and Bill, you'll have to kind of pick it up. My pick of the week. I was at the College of DuPage this past weekend, and I wanted to plug their app, their model app. It is fantastic. It's almost addictive. It's got the slider where you can just move the slider back and forth and see the different hours, and you can do forecast soundings on there. It is marvelous. So that will be my pick, and all these picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. So, Bill Murray, the floor belongs to you.
All right. Thank you, James. Brian Peters, what's your pick of the week?
Well, I ran across an interesting article about clearing a path through 60 feet of snow. It's a problem they have over in parts of Japan. And the pictures are absolutely stunning. I mean, like the one I'm looking at the top of the
with a big
the bus there, and the snow towers at least twice as tall as the bus. And it's amazing. I mean, I don't know how these guys do it, but it's a very interesting article, kind of a general article that I think might interest a lot of folks.
Yeah, I thought from Lake Tahoe, that between Reno and Lake Tahoe out there. I bet you've been there before, Dakota. So, Kevin, let's go to you for your pick of the week in case we lose you here.
Very quickly, it is there is a new update for Radar Scope for the Mac, and Brian is apparently happy about that.
Yes,
got a lot of new cool stuff, including what do you call it, pane view or window view. You can display 4 products at one time now, so it's pretty nice.
Just when I don't think they can come up with something new to add, they do.
Yeah,
I've got to get it to figure out how to make my animated GIF smaller, though. That's the only thing. I have to keep them to pretty small set of frames. Is there a way to do that, Brian Peters?
I haven't experimented with that yet, Bill.
Well, that's pretty cool. So thank you, Kevin. Thanks for being here tonight. Rick Smith up the road in Oklahoma. What's your pick of the week?
Well, I'm going back to basics. It's that spotter training season for most of us. I know James and the gang are doing a spotter training, this coming Thursday, Brian, somewhere? Did I see?
We've got 8 of them, I think.
8 of them?
Yeah.
And we're doing them too. So I'm kind of going back to basics, and the Comet website that has the very basic Skywarn spotter modules that we encourage all of our spotters to take. There's 2 of them there. Really well produced, really well done, and it's a really good introduction. If you're going to go sit in on a live spotter talk, I really encourage you to dive into these a little bit. I think you'll learn a lot.
Outstanding. Thank you, Rick. And Dakota, it's good to have you on the show tonight. I don't think we talked about how you landed in Colorado. You were a Hollings scholar, is that right?
Yeah. NOAA has a program where they pick about 100 sophomores every year, undergrad, to do a research project at some NOAA facility. And I picked the Sierra building out here, which is the Cooperative Institute for Research of the Atmosphere, I believe. And I did my work actually with my advisor and someone in the Sierra building. And then I just wanted to come back so bad, loved it so much out here, loved the research so much, and I had to stick around.
That's really cool. So how do folks get in touch with you if they need to, Dakota?
So yeah, I forgot to mention the show website is theweatherjunkies.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at the WX Junkies. I'm on Twitter at WeatherDak, WeatherDak, and that's probably the best place to find me. I do have a pick of the week, actually. You mind if I?
Absolutely, no. That's what we're here for.
I wanted to give a shout out to another weather podcast, Weather Hype, by Min, Fawn, and Castle Williams. They do a really good job, and they focus on social science mainly. And so it's a very, very different podcast, and they don't do it live. So they usually have a guest on, and it's a lot of fun. So shout out to Weather Hype. You can check them out at weatherhypepodcast.com.
Yeah, check out all the podcasts that are part of National Weather Podcast Month, because it's just really phenomenal. You guys are doing a great job over there, Dakota.
Oh yeah, thanks. We couldn't have done it without you guys. You really set the table, paved the way, whatever. I've been listening to you guys for I don't know, forever, and I was like, that looks fun. I should do that. So yeah, thanks for doing that. Thanks for having me on. Real honor to be here.
Yeah, it really is. It's cool to see all the cool podcasts doing what you guys are doing. You guys are doing a great job. Are you going to be out in California at the National Weather Association meeting in September?
Maybe. Hope so. I actually haven't been to an NWA meeting at all yet. So I got to get out there. I always go to AMS. So NWA is definitely something I need to get to.
Well, please do. We'd love to have you there. The deadline for the abstracts just passed, and they've got a ton of abstracts in. I think about 250. So it should be another huge event. So, any other business to bring before the group tonight, Rick Smith?
Bill, I was just going to say, I got to thanks Dakota for coming on. Appreciate it. And I got to listen to, I'm ashamed to say it's been a while. Took me a while to listen to your podcast, but I heard a recent episode, and I just got to say you guys do a great job. And I love the Weather Hype podcast too. I just want to, tell all our WeatherBrains listeners, if you like WeatherBrains, go give another few of these podcasts to try. There's some really good ones out there. They're all a little bit different. Some are produced and really tight with the audio and everything, and some are kind of loose and free and exciting and different, like this one and like the one that Dakota does. So give them a try. There's some really interesting ones out there, and that's what this month is all about.
Appreciate that, Rick.
Good stuff.
You're muted, Bill.
Bill, you're muted.
I think the computer did that on its own, because I sure did. So anyway, it probably I know what it was. I was typing on the wrong keyboard. I have too many keyboards here, and I think the computer got mad at me. So, Kevin, anything you need to add?
No.
Nothing to be an accelerant about tonight. That's too bad. So I'm sure we'll find something for you by next week.
That's my only function on this show.
That's not true at all. So, Brian Peters, anything you want to bring
No,
up
I'm doing great.
Good.
Just wish the people in the middle Atlantic states all the way up into New England, wish them the best over the next couple of days.
Here. Yeah.
And thank you, Brian, for your Weather 101 posts that you've been putting on the blog on Alabama WX. We appreciate those.
You're welcome.
Really nice. I hope made a little infographic with yours today, and had a little fun with it. That was a lot of
That's great.
Thank you. Very timely. So, Dakota, thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. Appreciate having your expertise on nor'easters.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was a blast and had a lot of fun. So thank you. This is the one episode I'm not going to have to listen to. So it's kind of weird. I'm going to have to do another podcast on my drive tomorrow morning. So
there you go. Well, you have a standing invitation anytime you want to come back, Dakota. We'd love to have you. We'll maybe see you on a 14er out there in Colorado soon.
There you go.
All right. Well, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We're here every week. I forget who is going to be on next week. Brian Peters, do you remember?
I don't recall.
Is it Doswell next week or Jim Cantori? It's one of those.
How could I forget? Yeah, Monday, March 20th. Chuck Doswell, Ricky Matthews from the Carolina Weather Group will join us. And then Cantori at a special time on the 27th. Kim Cunningham will join us that night too. So should be like a little mini Weather Channel reunion. And then we'll come back around to the tropics on Monday, April 3rd with Jim Williams from Hurricane City. So it's going to be, and I don't know if y'all have heard, but Dave Freeman, our good friend in Wichita, is retiring. And we're we're gonna roast him. It's gonna be like a Johnny Carson roast or something from the 70s on Monday, May the 8th. So it's
All right.
guaranteed to be a severe weather day in Kansas now that we've picked that day. So we've kept the 15th as an alternative. We'll see how that goes. But this is the weekly netcast that's all about weather. We used to say we were the best because we were the only one, but now we can't say that anymore because the young whippersnappers are catching up with us, Brian Peters.
We're still the best, and we're the oldest.
I second the first part of that.
Yeah, thank you, Dakota. You're being very respectful. But we do this thing on Monday nights most times. We'll be watching a little NCAA basketball, picking our brackets over the next few weeks. We should do that on the show. That would be an interesting process. But until next Monday night, when Dr. Chuck Doswell joins us, and we certainly will have an interesting time that night. This is Bill Murray for the whole gang. I'll say good night and God bless. See you next week.
Take care. Thanks, Dakota. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're awesome, Dakota. Thanks a million, man.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I hope my
so
101 gave Nor'easters enough good press there.
Oh, that was great. I saw your post earlier today, and I was excited that it was going to be this show. So, yeah, it was great.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being on.
Just dumb luck that we paired you with the Nor'easter and Dr.
I love it. I love it.
Thanks, Dakota.
All right, thank you. Have a nice night.
All right, guys.
Good night. See you guys.
And there's 20 people still watching. Wow. All right, guys. Thank you all. Nice to have Phil Klotz back on the show. And Dakota Smith, that was good. Of the weatherhypepodcast.com. So I got to go back and do more TV. We'll be on Song of the Night here in a minute. If you're watching this live Monday, March 13th at 10:10 Central, we'll be over on the Tweeter, just follow me on Twitter. When it says Song of the Night, we'll be there on live shortly. So we'll see you guys then. And for WeatherBrains next week, thanks for watching. Have a great week and God bless.